This tutorial will just quickly review what we did in the previous tutorial on the nervous system and add just a couple of further points. Just to remind ourselves that two main nerve cells or neurons are called sensory neurons and motor neurons. The sensory neuron is structured like this, which you've seen before. I've labelled all the main parts which I went through in the previous tutorial, with the addition of a structure called the myelin sheath, which you can see down here, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments. So the sensory neuron carries information to the central nervous system. The motor neuron carries information from the central nervous system away to effectors, muscles and glands that are going to carry out some kind of response. Again, you've seen this already, except I've added in the myelin sheath and dendrites, which are the branching ends around the cell body of the motor neuron. So these ends here connect to other neurons. These are the dendrites. Let's have a look at the myelin sheath. This is a very specialized structure, and it's a material that wraps itself around the axon. So shown here is the axon. Remember, the axon is the extended, elongated or stretched out part of the cell that forms the long section of the cell. Wrapped around the axon is this myelin sheath. Myelin is a particular chemical compound. In this particular diagram, we notice that the electrical signal is travelling from the left to the right down the axon. Now, what the myelin sheath does is it acts as an insulator. And in electricity, insulators prevent electricity from moving through it. A conductor is the part that allows electricity to move through it. So what the myelin sheath does is causes the electrical signal that travels down the nerve cell to jump. So in between sections of the myelin sheath there are exposed bits of the axon. So this is a bit of the axon that is not covered by the myelin. So the electrical signal, because it can't travel through the myelin, jumps down the axon in leaps and bounds, like this. So the myelin, acting as an insulator, actually causes the electrical signal to jump down the axon so that it actually moves down the axon through the nerve cell much, much faster. So the job of the myelin sheath is to speed up the electrical signal. Which is why nerve transmission, nerve messages through the body are so quick. And finally, let's just finish off with looking at an overall picture of how these two neurons plus another one, which I'll mention in a minute, work together. So if you look closely at this diagram, you'll notice that you have the ends of a sensory neuron acting as a receptor in the skin. So this receptor, which is part of the sensory neuron, may play a role in picking up pressure or touch or pain or something like that, depending on what it's designed to do. And it will send a message once the receptor is stimulated by some external stimulus. It will send an electrical message leaping down the nerve cell like this towards the central nervous system. Now we can see a cutaway section of the central nervous system here. This is the spinal cord, a cut-through section of it. So the electrical signal travels down the sensory neuron, leaping across the myelin sheath into the central nervous system. Now you can see another kind of neuron that's been put in here. In the central nervous system there are lots of very, very short neurons, sometimes called interneurons because they're in between neurons. Sometimes they're called multipolar neurons, multipolar, or connecting neurons. So these are short neurons found in the central nervous system that connect the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. And you can see one of these connecting neurons here. Here you have the beginning of the motor neuron. So the message is processed by the spinal cord, and then the message travels out via the motor neuron, leaping down the exposed axon around the myelin sheath all the way to an effector, that is an organ or something that's going to carry out a response. In this case, it's a muscle, which will contract or relax depending on what the message is that's coming down, and this will cause some kind of response. So this gives you a little bit of a sense of a nerve pathway carrying a message from a stimulus right through to a response via the nervous system. So nerve messages, just to sum up, nerve messages one, are very quick, so they're very fast, and two, they tend to be quite short-lived, so their effect is quite short. And we'll contrast this with the endocrine or hormone system in the next tutorial.